Hey, what's up, everybody? True Boxing here. Thank you for coming back to get hit with the truth. So, today gonna do the Andrade versus Quigly Breakdown, as they are gonna fight on Friday, November 19th, in the main event of a DAZN card, and it'll be for the WBO Middleweight Championship of the World, as Andrade makes, I want to say this is going to be his 4th or 5th title defense of that belt that he won back in, I want to say it was October of 2018. And, he's been, consistently defending his belt about two times a year. I want to say, I think he only fought once last year. But this is going to be his 2nd time this year. And he's taking on Quigley, who, I know a lot of people are probably like, why are you doing a breakdown video on this fight? And the reasoning is Andrade, for better or for worse, is a top 5 middleweight. I got him at number 3 at middleweight right now. And he's a name, and he gets main events. He does. So it's somewhat of a big, fight right here. It's a fight that people are interested in. Andrade's a fighter that people are interested in seeing, in watching. So, I'm going to do a breakdown video of his fights. I'm going to start doing breakdown videos of more and more fights, featuring guys in the top 10 fighting each other, and main events, and, intriguing top 10 fighters like, Demetrius Andre. So that's why I'm doing the video on this. This fight, not getting a lot of love because, Andrade is fighting another United Kingdom middleweight, which, you can't really knock Andrade too much. He's fighting whoever he can fight, whoever's willing to fight him. You can't really knock Andrade for taking this fight, because nobody really in the top 10 wants to fight him, wants to challenge him for his belt. Hopefully going forward after this, if he gets through Jason Quigley, he's coming in a heavy favorite. If he gets through Jason Quigley, maybe he can move forward towards, bigger things, like, moving up in weight, or he'll get a bigger fight. But this is who he's fighting now. Jason Quigley from the United Kingdom, WBO middleweight title on the line. With the breakdown videos, as always, we start with the favorite, then we move on to the underdog. I ask a bunch of questions. First, I give you what they've done coming into, rolling into the fight. Pretty much their last couple fights, 2 to 3 fights. And then, what kind of fight they need to have to win. What kind of, can they win by knockout? Can they win by a decision? What does it mean for them? What does it mean if they win or lose? What does it mean for them? What does it mean for boxing if they win or lose? And then again, I switch over to the underdog, and then after that, I give my prediction on the fight. So, kick it off with Demetrius Andre, the undefeated and reigning WBO middleweight champion. And what is he doing rolling into this fight? Well, his last time out was earlier this year against Liam Williams. Knocked Williams down early, and then ended up winning a clean decision. But, he got roughed up a little bit in the later rounds. He got hit with some good shots by Liam Williams, and, walked away with a decision. But, it's kind of a workmanlike performance in that one. Not a lot of people, were thrilled with his performance. He did go out and he called Canelo out after Canelo beat Billy Joe Saunders. I believe it was that night, or it was the night when he beat Abney Yildirim. I think it was the Saunders win. He came out and was trying to call him out at the press conference. Canelo told him, get the fuck out of here. It didn't really lead to anything. Canelo's not interested in fighting Andrade right now. He's just not, and Andrade needs to accept that. But anyways, prior to that, last year he took on Luke Keeler and knocked him out in the 9th round. And then prior to that, probably his most complete win in June of 2019, he dominated Maciej Sulecki to a one-sided 12-round unanimous decision. I say his most clean win in terms of, since he won his first world title back in 2014 at 154 when he beat Vanes Martirosyan, when he handed him his first loss. He took a knockdown in that fight, but he handed Martirosyan his first loss. Andre's a widely avoided fighter. Not a lot of it's his style, and he doesn't bring a lot of money. So people need to respect that. He doesn't bring a big payday, and his style is very awkward. He's a tall, lengthy fighter. He doesn't mix it up a lot with you. So, hey, and that's just his style. But, he's not a very entertaining, it's not a very entertaining style. So it's kind of unattractive, and guys really aren't interested in getting in a ring with him. So that's what he's got rolling into this fight. But, he's facing Jason Quigley, who's hungry. So, Andre, what does he need to do to win this fight? Obviously, he's the better boxer, and, he needs to box and set his punches up. But I really believe if Andrade wants that fight or a big Canelo fight or a big name fight next, he needs to take more risk and go for broke and go for knockouts. These decisions aren't making you look good. Go for the knockout. If you don't end up getting it, fine, but go for the knockout. If you get into trouble, yeah, box a little bit and set it back up. But when you're such a heavy favorite like this, people are going to remember you, more if you knock your opponent out. And I'm sorry, Jason Quigley is a guy that Andrade should knock out. At the end of the day, he should. You look at the fight on paper, Andrade should win this fight by knockout. But, is he just going to settle for a decision? Can he win by knockout? Absolutely, he can win by knockout. I think he can. If he presses him and puts the pressure on him and just doesn't, and is just relentless, yeah, he can win by knockout. Can he win a decision? Of course he can. He's the far better boxer. He can definitely outbox Jason Quigley and win a unanimous decision in this one for sure. So that's what he needs to do in order to win the fight. In my opinion, winning the fight isn't enough. He has to be impressive, and if he wants to be impressive, he's got to win by knockout. Now, what does it mean for Andrade if he wins this fight? It's not going to mean much, but again, how he wins does matter in my opinion. If he goes out there and dominates Jason Quigley and stops him, that's what he should do against a guy like that, in my opinion. So people are going to be like, okay, when he fights these guys, he's doing what he's supposed to do against those guys, and he's taking more risk, opening himself up a little bit more. People are, that's the thing. You have to force these guys. Either there's one of two ways for Andrade to win this fight. He wins this fight overwhelmingly impressive with a knockout, and that's going to force these guys to stop avoiding him. Be like, hey, we got to fight this guy, or we are really running from him. And then the other option is to open yourself up, be a little vulnerable, get caught. I'm not saying that's an intentional thing, but you get caught and you get hurt, but you fight through it. You look like you're hittable. Then guys might be more interested in fighting after that. Once they see that your style is not so, unattractive to where they don't have a chance at beating you, or they don't have a chance of looking good beating you. So that's the two ways. Now, so what is a win here? It's not going to mean much, but holding on to his undefeated record and pushing forward means a lot. Pushing forward towards hopefully bigger things, that means a lot to him. So how he wins is going to be big. Now, and it's big for his resume to keep himself undefeated. That's a big thing he has going for him right now, is being an undefeated world champion. What does it mean for Andrade if he loses? It's going to devastate his career and his, where he's at. He's already not an attractive fighter, doesn't bring in a lot of money. He goes and shows everybody that he's really not on that high level too, then he can kiss those big fights goodbye. So a loss here devastates Andrade at this point. It really does. What does it mean for boxing if Andrade wins? Well, hey, it's going to help boxing because you keep another undefeated champion calling other guys out. So I think Andrade is good for boxing. I do. So a win here is good for him. What does it mean for boxing if Andrade loses? I mean, it hurts boxing a little bit. It does, because you have an undefeated champion who has a potential to, possibly get a big fight. Possibly he's floating around the Canelo thing after the press conference where he called Canelo out. That gave him credibility to the extent that, hey, if Canelo fights him, you know, people are going to be like, hey, this is the dude that showed up at Canelo's press conference. It adds fuel to that fire. If he fights somebody else with a big name, Triple G, they're going to be like, hey, that's the dude that showed up at Canelo's press conference talking shit. He's an undefeated champion. Kind of gives him some cred right there, you know? So I think it hurts boxing if Andrade loses. It does. So let's switch over to the underdog, Jason Quigley, now from the United Kingdom. Quigley coming into this fight's coming off his career best win. He defeated Shane Mosley Jr. in his last fight. Clean win right there. And, you know, even though Mosley's not considered to be anything serious, Quigley did get a clean win and, you know, set himself up. Now, he's only got one loss in his career a couple years back to Turiano Johnson when he got stopped in the ninth round. And Turiano Johnson is a legitimate middleweight. He's a good, solid fighter, you know, so that's not anything to kind of shake your head at right there. You know, that's a decent middleweight opponent. But, you know, he's coming in a heavy underdog in this fight right here. So, you know, he's coming since the Johnson loss, though, he's got like 3 or 4 straight wins, and that was the only loss of his career. So, he's hungry, you know, he's saying all the right things. So we'll see if he could prove that. What kind of fight does he need to have to win this fight? Well, he needs to take a page out of Liam Williams' book, and he needs to get in there, and he needs to get on the inside of Andre, not let Andre extend those hands for his power punches. But Andre's going to throw a lot of punches. Quigley needs to try to get on the inside. He needs to cut the ring off, and he needs to try to make it a rough, tough fight for Demetrius Andre and bully him. And you know what? That starts with boxing, though, by jabbing your way in. You know, just going in head first, looking for one punch, Andrade's going to carve him to shreds. But if he can jab, and if Andrade, he needs to hope that Andrade's two things, that he's overlooking him possibly, or the other thing, that Andrade's deciding to mix it up with him. He does that, then that gives Jason Quigley a better chance of pulling off the upset here. It really does. So he needs to try to cut off the ring node, jab his way in, cut the ring off, not let Andrade move and get away from him and box, you know, the way Andrade does. If he does that, Andrade's going to carve him to shreds, you know, and he wants to make, you know, a lasting impression. Win or lose, you want to make a lasting impression in a title fight, especially when you're not a big name. So he needs to go in there and go for broke. That's what he needs to do to possibly pull off the upset here. Now, can he win this fight by knockout? I mean, anything's possible. I think Andrade's one of those guys that if he overlooks you because he's so focused on the bigger fights, if he overlooks you, I definitely can see, I've seen him get knocked down before. I've seen him get wobbled a little bit. You know, he gets caught, anything's possible. So yeah, I think Quigley might be able to pull off an upset and, you know, and knock him out. Can he win a decision? God, that's going to be tough, man. Andrade knows how to rack up those points, and he's a great boxer. So from what we've seen so far, he's a very good boxer. So I think it'd be very hard for him to win a decision. I'm going to say I don't see him winning a decision if it goes 12. The only way is if he absolutely goes in there and dominates every round, and I just don't see that happening. But hey, you never know. Now, what does it mean for Quigley if he wins this fight? Oh, it's huge for his career. One, he becomes the world champion. I mean, that's huge. Even if it leads to a rematch where he were to lose in the rematch, I mean, so what? You know, just getting that win, becoming a world champion, then you're going forward as a former world champion as opposed to a former title challenger, which still gives you some credit. But a win here is huge for Jason Quigley. Be the biggest of his career by far, and he become a world champion for his first time, and that would just be huge. What does it mean if he loses? What does it mean for him if he loses? Well, nobody's really expecting him to win. So obviously it sucks, it hurts, but how he loses is important. It's going to matter. If he goes in there and gets his ass whipped, then people aren't going to be surprised by that. So, you know, that shouldn't bring him down too much. But, you know, I mean, he's just going to be looked at as a stepping stone guy. But if he goes out there and loses a close one, really, you know, goes out on his shield or really, you know, does his best, kind of like Liam Williams did in his last fight when he fought Andrade. Now Liam Williams is potentially getting a showdown with Chris Eubank Jr. You know, you want to leave an impression even if you lose. He wants to leave an impression to where people are still going to want to fight him. You know, the bigger names are still going to want to fight him. Not to where you're like basically a gatekeeper and just the second tier or third tier middleweights want to use you as a springboard. You want to still leave an impression of where you can get a big fight later. So depends on how he loses, how it affects him. What does it mean for boxing if Quigley pulls off the upset and wins the title? Well, you know, it's going to hurt boxing a little bit. We lose one of our undefeated champions, you know, that's, you know, right around the Canelo. I mean, I think people want, for the most part, I think you want a guy like Andrade, especially floating around your pound-for-pound king Canelo. You want him to kind of stay undefeated to build a fight down the road with Canelo, you know, and it's important. So it's going to hurt boxing a bit if Quigley wins. What does it mean for boxing if Quigley loses? It's not going to hurt boxing at all. You know, nobody's expecting Quigley to win this fight. He's widely looked at as a stay busy opponent for Andrade, and nobody's going to be shocked if he loses. So it's not going to hurt boxing at all. Now, at the end of this, what's my prediction on this fight? And it's pretty simple. I don't see Demetrius Andre losing this fight. The only chance, in my opinion, that Quigley has is if Andrade, there's two. One, and the more likely, is if Andrade is just overlooking him and he gets caught. You know, that's possible. The other is if Andrade just completely fights out of his style and decides to just fight a brawling, toe-to-toe type fight, then you play into Quigley's hands, and Quigley has a better chance of beating you. If you fight your opponent's fight, they have a much better chance of beating you. And that's a little bit further, because Andrade, what I see is him coming in and boxing and trying to brawl a little bit too. But he needs to get out of that, oh, I'm hurting you early, I put you down early. He needs to finish a fucking opponent. I think it'd be big for Andrade if he goes in there and blows out Quigley in the first half of the fight. If he can knock him out within 6 rounds or within 5 rounds, that would be a good, you know, thing for whatever's next for Andrade. To get this fucker out of there, he's not a big name. You know, show everybody you're willing to trade and go for that knockout, leave an impression. You know, that's what you want to do. If you can get one of those highlight reel knockouts, leave a lasting impression, that means a lot, you know, going forward. So that's what Andrade needs to be focused on. Focus on the opponent in front of him, and I think he gets him out of there without a problem. So that's it, guys. That's the breakdown video for Demetrius Andre and Jason Quigley as they collide for the WBO Middleweight Championship at 160 pounds. That takes place in the main event of a DAZN card on Friday, November 19th. Also, don't miss this card, because on the undercard, you got a couple good fights. You got Julio Cesar Martinez is taking on McWilliams Arroyo finally on the undercard, but the co-feature is really good. You got Marajan Akhmadaliyev, who's the #1 fighter at 122 pounds super bantamweight. He's the unified champion there. He's making a mandatory defense against former world title challenger, always tough man, Diego De La Hoya conqueror, Ronnie Rios. That should be a pretty entertaining fight right there on the undercard. Very, very good, and a lot of talent in that co-feature. Make sure you check it out. Friday, November 19th on DAZN. I hope you guys enjoyed it. True Boxing, you've been hit with the truth.